technically any of the dispensaries can make themselves legitimate by hiring a pharmacist and becoming a retail pharmacy. And then they don't need to,
Wow.
and then they don't need to change anything. They can apply with the board of pharmacy to be a pharmacy, and all they dispense from their retail pharmacy is cannabis products, but they have to obviously have a pharmacist on site. And right now a lot of issue is they just don't want to pay for a pharmacist.
The real issue is they don't give a about patients.
They don't.
Welcome to Season 5 of the Cannabis Truth Podcast. Your host is Honey Smith Walls, author of the new book, Healing Beyond High, Cannabis Truth, a gentle, practical guide for elders to learn cannabis fundamentals safely and effectively without overuse or overwhelm. In a world where the FDA has yet to stamp its approval on this ancient natural remedy, Honey Smith Walls bridges the gap between Western healthcare norms, uplifting benefits and relief through gentle cannabis plant therapies. Join this 21st century cannabis shaman, uniquely positioned to assess the green intentions of medical, farming, and business industries in cannabis and uncover fascinating historical, political, scientific, and spiritual facets of the plant.
So, won't you introduce yourself to the audience? You've been here several times before, and we love your work, Leah. It's so important, and it's so great to have you back. Tell our audience what you do and all of that juicy jazz, all those lovely letters behind your name, especially those new ones in this new profession. It's so freaking exciting.
Sure thing. So I am Dr. Leah Johnson. I'm a medical cannabis specialist and clinical pharmacist. And I received my pharmacy degree from the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Science. And I received my specialty in medical cannabis from the master's program at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy that has an accredited master's program in medical cannabis science and therapeutics. So it's a great program. I 100% recommend it to literally all healthcare professionals and anybody interested in cannabis, because you can do it 100% remotely at home, and you just learn so much about this really important medication and just how important, like how useful it is for patients. From all my research, all my background, as well as my research and all the work I've done, I work with patients throughout the US, and I, as well as actually abroad now. I actually have started working with patients in Australia and patients in the UK as well. But so I'm broadening it a little bit, but I'm working with patients throughout the US, and I help patients initiate and adjust their medical cannabis therapy. So most of my background is mostly in patients with autism, pain, anxiety, depression, insomnia, the big ones, but autism is a huge grouping of patients that I have now, especially patients that are young adults, usually like in the early 18, 19-year-olds, or pediatrics. And when it comes to autism especially, but seizure disorders as well, cannabis has just been a lifesaver. One of my patients that I'm working with right now is a patient who had both horrible seizures that she couldn't control that was due to being physically abused sexually abused as a child. And so her PTSD is actually triggering the seizures. So none of the regular seizure meds work for her. And on top of that, before working together, she had horrible suicidal ideations. And she actually while we started discussing working together, she had actually tried to commit suicide right before. So we had to verify that we can get her stable before, obviously. And then, so once we verified that she wasn't going to harm herself, we did initiate the cannabis therapy. And since then, seizures are a little bit hard to control, but she's been doing phenomenal, like just a breakthrough here and there if it's during certain things, of course, like hormone changes such as their monthly cycle and so on and so forth. But when it comes to her suicidal ideations, nothing. She hasn't tried to commit suicide. She hasn't been depressed. She has been absolutely doing wonderful on very, very, very low doses of THC, very low doses, and even lower, not low, but lower doses of CBD. So really, this medication has just been so beneficial, and it's really just learning how to use it. And it's every patient's different. They all need different doses, but really, if you work with a medical cannabis specialist, you can usually find the right dose for you to help control your some of your ailments.
Leah, I've got so many questions about that particular patient. Um, did how did you stabilize her before giving her treatment? How does that happen for a patient?
So that was actually she had been trying many things before her and I started together, and the reason we hadn't initiated therapy yet was she had been stable, but we didn't start because the mother wanted to continue with hypnotherapy that she had been using, and I just explained that the only way to know what treatment is working is to initiate one treatment at a time. So since she had already booked another hypnotherapy, I backed off and let her continue with that. And so the hypnotherapy seemed to help the seizures, but for some reason it really just because it helped with the psyche causing the seizures, but at the same time, her emotional disposition was not good. So oddly enough, the hypnotherapy helped with the seizures, but actually made the depression worse. So what she ended up doing was after the hypnotherapy, we had her work with her cognitive behavioral therapist, because that's the most important thing I always explain. It's like, it does not matter if you have depression and you're working with somebody or anxiety with somebody with meds, you have to have somebody that's also going to be working with cognitive behavioral therapy, just somebody to talk to, a therapist. In other words, meds don't fix everything. You need to talk to somebody about your issues. So she
always the talk.
Yeah, it's always, you need the talk. The meds don't fix it. You need the talk. So, so she, after that, I said, I made sure that she was doing the cognitive behavioral therapy. And once she didn't, she was still very depressed, but once she hit a point where she didn't feel the need to take her life, then we were able to start. And I explained, let's not do any more hypnotherapy while we're on the cannabis therapy. Let's just do one and see how she does. And we did have to up the dose, just to control her seizures. But really, she is a happy girl now. The worst is she's a teenager, so of course we're gonna have hormone issues. But but now she gets reasonably frustrated and reasonably annoyed with things as a normal teenager would, and she doesn't feel the weight beating. So a lot of times, in the past, she felt that her teammates were attacking her emotionally and being mean to, and really that brought her down. But with the cannabis therapy, she's able to kind of go, I'm reading into it. It's nothing, it's not, I'm not gonna take these things seriously. So what? They didn't like how I played that round. I'll do better next time. And so it's helped her to stop internalizing these things to cause
that
her
negative looping chatter.
Exactly.
Ooh, that's so awful, especially for girls.
Yeah, so that's why so that's why, so for some patients, like for example, I have another patient who has seizures, but it's not due to emotional stuff. It is due to, if she gets tired, they do increase, but she has no emotional issues. So we actually found the THC was not beneficial for her. It was making her sleepy. So we actually had to make sure she was on a broad spectrum. So it's very different. Same patient, about the same age, have similar presentations, but at the end of the day, one therapy is not the same for the other. So my 16-year-old patient had to use THC to control that depression and that anxiety she was having, where my other patient, the THC wasn't needed, and you could tell because all it did was make her sleepy. So we know that it wasn't improving her seizures, and now that she's off of it, she's doing really great on a broad spectrum, which is all the components of the plant except the THC is extracted at the end for those who can't tolerate THC.
Wow. Okay, I've got another question. Have you noticed it's been going on for a long time? Younger and younger girls going into menstruation.
So that's not through cannabis, but just through society. And there's actually been a lot of
Right.
research showing that when sexual subjects are discussed at a very young age, it actually brings about premature um, um, puberty. Sorry, I'm blanking on words.
Yeah.
But
Like,
that's why it's really important. And that's why what we're seeing now is, especially like, so for example, I came from a family who was very verbal about sexuality at a young age. I'm not saying that it's all Jewish families. I happen to be one of the Jewish families that were very verbal about sexuality at a very young age. And myself and my sister, as well as my mother, all hit our cycles very early. Where in other families that were more kind of quiet about sexuality at a young age. So for example, my stepsister is a stepsister. So she didn't come into the family until she was about 11. So she didn't get all of the discussions that I got from my extended family as a child. So
yeah.
she didn't start hers until she was about 14 or 15. And even that's, depending on who you ask, is still, it's about in range. But but we're seeing, for my family, it was more traditional to be around 10, 11, 12, you know, you know,
Wow.
yeah. So it is starting earlier, and they have noticed that that's part of it. But of course, if you're sexually abused as a child, it's obviously going to cause huge trauma, but on top of that,
Okay.
it's potentially could lead to
Yeah.
early reproduction.
Hormonal release. Right. Right. Um, I I was wondering if part of the reasoning behind, well, it's got to be food, isn't it?
Well,
Isn't it
no,
food
I
and
wouldn't. I
stress and stuff,
not
the way we eat?
Not necessarily.
Really?
Food causes a lot of issues, a lot of hormone issues, but so far they haven't necessarily linked that. Currently, it's still very strongly linked to, from what I've seen, at least personally, a lot of involvement in sexuality at a young age. So yeah, a lot more of that and less of food and stuff. Food causes more issues with all the GI problems we're having recently, all the gluten intolerances we're seeing, all of the medications not getting absorbed as well. That's all due to our
Oh,
food. So the
oh,
GI issues have just gone, and the autoimmune diseases have also just gone off the rocker after all the contamination. And by contamination, I don't mean like pesticides, but I mean that even the chemicals that are being used to prevent mold on our crops are causing, they don't wash them off before we get them. So they just grow in the plant and they spray them at the end of the season. So they stay in the plant and then we ingest them. So that's why we're seeing a lot of, like, truthfully, my generation, so people who are in their like 40s and below are seeing a lot more GI issues with gluten, especially corn and wheat, than any other generation before us. Because if you think about it, the change in how they were um, trying to prevent animals or insects from devouring the crops was, they decided, they're spraying closer to the end of the season so it stays in the plant, but that didn't happen until the early 80s. And that's our generation. So
right.
our generation got that food from square one. We also had the food that was processed with all the chemicals. So you didn't see boxed foods really until the 80s. So if you think about it, like,
Right.
so that's why we're seeing more GI issues personally. And mind you, this is my theory. And there are articles showing some of this to be true. But again, this is just what I've seen in practice, and what I've seen from a lot of people in my age group and younger, is that their GI system is just getting destroyed from all the preservatives and all the processed food that we've been eating. Because before the 80s, people would make food. Now
Right.
everything is boxed and pre-made and
Processed, right.
and processed and preservatives galore. And so I think we're just going to keep having issues. And it's also pretty clear that it's us, specifically what we've been doing since the 80s. Because if you look at all the other countries that are way older than us, that have been around way longer than the United States, they never tempered with their food. They left it alone. They didn't cut corners. They didn't turn their sugar into high fructose corn syrup, as far as I know, in most countries. And they're very healthy. I mean, there's just a much the population's healthier. Also, if you see pictures from like the 1970s, even the quote unquote overweight people looked like our average people now.
Oh, no
So,
kidding.
and it's just, so when did things change? Well, the 80s changed, and now we're seeing a huge difference. So I personally think that we're doing a disservice to our population. I think that the US population is just going to get more and more ill, get sicker and sicker, and have more issues because of the fact of the food we're intaking. There was a study done actually by a gentleman, Dr. Spellman. He's phenomenal. He actually reviewed the intake back in the hunter and gatherer days versus now. And there was a lot of studies and research between these, between the interval. And what you can see is the amount of plants that we used to eat was we mostly ate plants plus meat and whatnot. Now we eat almost no plants. And
right.
And it makes sense because, a box of crackers is 50 cents and an apple is like $3. That doesn't make any sense. So, that's why, if you're cutting, if you need to save money, you're going to go for the cheaper stuff. So, and that's taking away the plants, and the plants should be first. They shouldn't be last. They shouldn't be the plants should be cheaper because that's what our bodies need, but they can't make money off of plants. So it's expensive. So that's why, and what they've shown is that by the reduction of plants compared to them, a lot of the things of the body fat, for example, is way higher now than it used to be. Even like right after hunter and gatherer, when there was farming and they didn't actually need to, work out to get their meal, right, they still were healthier because of the fact that they weren't, they were eating a lot of fruits, vegetables, and they weren't doing all these preservatives, all these issues. So right, it's just phenomenal to see the difference. And again, other countries are much healthier than the United States. And the only difference is we do put all the junk in our food that they don't. And the healthiest people in the US seem to be the top 1%, who all seem to be able to afford all the healthier stuff. So I really
it's
think
not easy.
It's not
easy to eat and be healthy and be and have a good body and make yourself well and feel good and have a good metabolism. It's not easy. I mean, you might start out that way from mama's milk, but everything seems to go south after that when you start eating food.
Hey everybody, it's me, honey. I'm at the dog park, of course, about to play a little music. I'm going to light up so I can get a little spiritual support going on here too. Not only for my music, but also pain relief for my arthritic hands and all that neuropathy going on. As, an old woman, we get all that stuff going on. But that's okay. We've got remedies and help for it now. Good, gentle plant therapy. But what I'm really here to tell you about is that I'm going to be a guest speaker at the Women's Spirit Retreat coming up July 18th through 20th. It's a free online event, and I'm going to be talking about the spirit of cannabis and how to tame THC in marijuana so that you can take advantage of gentle plant therapy for pain relief without worrying about getting too high or, having anxious feelings from that special compound. Anyway, join me to learn how you can tame THC and marijuana and about the beautiful, gentle, spiritual effects that cannabis can give you when you're trying to be creative or you just want to be creative and gentle and loving. Pearl, thank you for telling everybody about our event coming up. We so appreciate all of your chatter. Thanks, Pearl. I love you. Everybody, come see us at the event.
Is corn a heavy metal uptake?
To be honest, I'm not sure. It could be. I do know though that both wheat and corn were the two crops in the U.S. that were contaminated with and that contamination has just caused so much issues.
And that's what I'm saying.
But not from heavy metal, from what they're spraying on the plants so that bugs don't eat them. It's the pesticides they're spraying on these plants that are causing a lot of these issues. And the problem is, originally, they were only allowed to spray these plants at the beginning of the season so that it could be washed out by the end. But the problem is then all the bugs would devour the plants by the end of the season. So then that's why in the early 80s, they resprayed a second time towards the end of the season, and it leaves the pesticides inside the plant.
And then it leaves the societies sick.
Yep. And my regular job, I review for chemo medications for patients, like that's my job. And I can tell you right now that the obesity in this country is just astronomical. Like the first thing I do when I see a patient, just curiosity wise, is if I see a request for chemo, especially for a very young patient, I check weight. And almost every single, I've seen weights at a point where I have to call the doctor's office to verify if it's kilograms or pounds, because even the kilograms are in 100, like 103, 107 kilograms.
Horrible.
And that's
horrible.
And it ends up that the younger patients are the ones with these higher body weights, and they're getting, but not just that. I've also seen a huge increase in women getting breast cancer, even not overweight, but in their early 30s, late 20s, it's becoming more prevalent. And again, if these are healthy people with healthy weight, what else could it be besides the food they are intaking causing this problem?
Right.
Like even a colleague of mine who is a chemo pharmacist, she actually was diagnosed with breast cancer at 36. She is healthy. She eats right. She exercises. So what could have given this girl cancer when she has no family history of it, nothing else. And it's all she's doing is, eating things. And she doesn't go for organic because why would she go for organic? And maybe if she had, who knows what would have happened. But she agrees that the prevalence, again, this is all, speculative, of course. I wanted to, but in general, what I personally am seeing through my job is huge intake of cancer patients. A lot of the younger ones are obese, and then there are tons that are also not obese that are starting to get it. And just but the biggest trend is that it's getting younger. The cancer is getting younger in younger people.
Okay, so we're seeing a real shift in our society right now just regarding cannabis. So do you think we can make that same shift with eating? We've got to change something.
Well, we say we're making a shift in cannabis, but right now there's a lot of talk and no action. They're talking about rescheduling, but it's one of those things where, okay, government, when you actually reschedule it, I will believe it. But so we have to wait, because technically right now there are people who are still fighting for it to be Schedule 1.
Yes, and then the NBA just released it from its substance abuse list.
Yeah. But that's the problem, is you've got people fighting it to stay on the Schedule 1, saying that it has no medical value, and then you have other things taking it off list. So honestly, cannabis is still a mess and going up and down. And so until the DEA finally says it is, we have no idea what it is. So we can just hope that they, based on the DEA, if you actually look at the Controlled Substance Act, and this is something all pharmacists have to know because part of our thing, part of our curriculum, is Schedule 1 is a medication that has pretty much shown to have no medical value. So obviously cannabis can't be there. It doesn't make sense. But the other thing is that, from what I've seen as well, even drugs that have a medicinal value but are excessive abuse potential can actually be thrown to Schedule 1. And the only reason because I did a deep dive into Quaaludes. So, because I was curious about Quaaludes.
I
because
did Quaalude in the day.
a lot of people had Quaaludes in the day. And the one
Uh-huh.
thing that they said is no one seemed to have a negative opinion of it. They all seemed to see like, we love our Quaaludes. But the problem is that it was abused like nothing else. And they were like, yeah, technically it does have medical value, but the abuse potential is just so high. We need to put it to Schedule 1. So Quaaludes are Schedule 1. No pharmaceutical company can legally make them at this point, which is why they can't be found.
But does anybody?
And don't look for Quaaludes because I like I said, I did a deep dive into this, and pretty much what they're saying is all Quaaludes now are just a mix between fentanyl and all this other crap that people are pretending to be Quaaludes so they could sell it. So definitely don't look for Quaaludes. Definitely not recommended. But what I'm saying is that things can be put to a schedule even with a benefit. They have high abuse potential, but cannabis doesn't have high abuse potential. Now, it has never been shown to be physically addicting, meaning that your body physically needs it to function, but it can be mentally addicting, because kind of the same way with tramadol. Tramadol was a medication that was originally,
I know that old workhorse. Yeah.
It wasn't scheduled because originally it was like, it doesn't have physical abuse potential. However, it made you feel
for
great.
Everything. Yeah.
It made you feel wonderful. Because not only did it take away your pain, but it also helped your serotonin. It helped to increase the serotonin in your brain, which made you happy. It got rid of sadness and depression. So your pain was gone. You were feeling great. Why should I not keep taking these?
Right.
So of course they were like, well, okay, we're going to move it to schedule because obviously now they can be abused. So cannabis is the same idea. They're thinking to themselves, well, we don't want to be Schedule 1 because it does have medical ability and really no physical abuse potential. But if a patient really feels good on it, they might keep taking it, and they might abuse it, and just to get the euphoria, which, is not the medical purpose of it for most patients. And due to that, we don't want them to overdose on it. So the potential of overdose
is there ever a reason to find euphoria medically?
I mean, usually no, but like yes and no. So like, for example, like euphoria in the idea of you had a really stressful day and you just need something to take the edge off to feel that little bit of a lift at the end.
A little lemon martini.
That's technically a euphoric effect, but it's not, and it's technically a medicinal effect. So, I mean, technically, yes, but there are also people who just try to just keep pounding that euphoria. And that's what we're trying not to do. If it's just, I've got nothing better to do. I'm sitting in my basement. I'm playing video games and I'm bored. I'm just gonna smoke. That's cannabis use disorder. It's like you don't have a purpose. It's not benefiting you. You're just bored. You have nothing better to do. Now, if you're like, you know what, I'm feeling a little edgy. I need something. That's different. You're treating something. So it's really just the difference between overdoing it and not overdoing it. And so the people still want to keep it a Schedule 1, and people are fighting right now. So right now in the rescheduling, it's in what's called public comment phase. And public comment actually, I think, ends in a week or so, ends somewhere in July. And it was a 2-week period. Again, that ends in about 2 weeks. It was a 2-month period, though, that people could submit to the DEA reasons why it should be Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, whatever, descheduled. So they have comments from so many cannabis organizations. My nonprofit, the Pharmacist Cannabis Coalition of California, the Society of Cannabis Clinicians sent in one.
Good for them.
The Association for Cannabis Nurses sent it in. Like all
ACN,
the big,
right.
And even national pharmacy organizations like CSHP, ASHP, they all sent in. So there's a lot of people. Half of the cannabis organizations half of them are for rescheduling, half are for D. So that's fine, because I mean, it just really shows them all, it shows them everything. It shows the government everything, because you have to kind of think that the people making this decision know nothing about cannabis.
So they've proven to us.
So might as well let the professionals read everything. Why does this group want it to be rescheduled? Why does this group want it to be descheduled? What is the recommendation? Read through all of that. And there are absolutely medical
Valid
organizations that are sending in things saying it should not be anything. It should stay Schedule 1. So, so what they need to do now after the public comment period closes is they have to take in all of these public comments that are probably millions. They probably have millions of public comments right now.
Good.
That they now need to sort through and to get an idea. So obviously, if they've got a ton of things saying, keep it Schedule 1, keep it Schedule 1, which I doubt they're going to have a ton of it, then they have to kind of compare it to the others. But if they have like a few that say those, but most say reschedule, they'll kind of see, and it gives, and most of the comments will usually state how to go about the process, because there's no process involved. So if it is rescheduled, what's the process? If it's descheduled, what the process would be? So it kind of, just kind of like they always say in meetings, never come with a problem, come with a solution to the problem you're going to bring up. So for example, you don't want to just say it's supposed to be rescheduled, figure out what to do with rescheduling. You're supposed to say, should be rescheduled. This is why, this is how, this is the protocol, this is what you need. So that they could say, oh, yep, I like that, I'm going to go with that, as opposed to, well, I don't know what you're suggesting, so I'm going to move you on, and I'm going to go to the
that
next
won't
one.
work, right? Yeah.
So
they're looking for a plan because they don't have one.
So that's what they're doing is a lot of people sent in plans. So most likely it will be rescheduled, at least at first, only because to deschedule it, I personally think cannabis should be descheduled. That's my own personal opinion. I don't think that we should have prescriptions for it. However, I do believe that there should be a healthcare professional at all dispensaries personally, whether it's a trained nurse, pharmacist, or provider to discuss about cannabis medicine. That's my own opinion, but so I believe it should be rescheduled, then descheduled. It should definitely eventually be descheduled. But for the rescheduling, what we found is there's actually a loophole where, so the one thing people need to know is all scheduled medication must be sold by federal law at a licensed pharmacy. So that means that by law, if it is rescheduled, then the dispensaries continue to be illegal federally. And what happens at that level, I don't know. But the fun loophole that we found was that I personally, like I said, do not believe that cannabis meds should be, I don't mind a rec. I think recs are great. I think a medical card is great. I have an issue with go get something and then leave it up to the poor patient and have them have no idea. So there is a loophole that there's actually a law that federally a pharmacist can dispense a controlled substance that's either Schedule 3, 4, and 5, as long without a prescription from a doctor, as long as the substance is not from a pharmaceutical company. So all the current tinctures on the market right now and all the products at dispensaries technically could all be sold. If they go Schedule 3, they could all be sold at a pharmacy and dispensed by a pharmacist with a patient just by a patient coming up. The pharmacist says, okay, and the pharmacist can dispense up to current law is up to 270 milliliters, because back in the day it was all liquid. I mean, this is a very, very old loophole.
Right.
But obviously it'll have to get altered. But that's what we recommended, is that our recommendation from the Pharmacist Cannabis Coalition of California, along with the California Society of Health Systems Pharmacists and the American Society of Health Systems Pharmacists, have all sent in our recommendation that it be up to the pharmacist to dispense the product, and it does not need a prescription from a provider. And that way it can get billed through insurance because it's being distributed through a pharmacy, but they don't need to have to go find a doctor who knows what they're doing, because there's so many that have no idea what they do about cannabis therapy. So I mean, even if it's as simple as, okay, get your MMIC, get your medical rec card, or get your recommendation, bring it to the pharmacy, then they'll dispense it to you, but without the actual 5 tablets of blah blah blah. No, because that doesn't make sense, because you don't know what products that that pharmacy might have. So a pharmacist is very, very, very capable of saying, oh, your doctor wrote here that they wanted something along this line. Okay, we have a product that can do this and this, and based on its formulation, it will work this long and should help you with blah, blah, blah. Or your doctor said you needed something for insomnia. Here is a good tincture that you should start with. This is what you should do for it. Follow up with me in a couple of days and we'll go back into it. Like, that's how it
That would be
should be.
wonderful.
Exactly.
That would be wonderful.
And that's what we do with what's it called, with Sudafed. You just have to sign in a book, and you still have to sign it's a controlled substance. So there still has to be a book. You'll have to sign out your cannabis that you bought at the pharmacy, but it's all documented. It's all there. And, it's easy. We already do it for Sudafed. We can do it with cannabis. It's not a big deal.
There it is. It's already got a protocol and everything.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we recommended. Now, mind you, if it's descheduled, that's up to the federal what they want to do for that. But for rescheduling, it's like, just have the same products that and I was joking. I was just saying, I was joking around. I was like, technically, any of the dispensaries can make themselves legitimate by hiring a pharmacist and becoming a retail pharmacy. And then they don't and then they don't need to change anything. They can apply with the Board of Pharmacy to be a pharmacy, and all they dispense from their retail pharmacy is cannabis products. But they have to obviously have a pharmacist on site. And right now, a lot of issue is they just don't want to pay for a pharmacist.
The real issue is they don't give a shit about patients.
They don't, not at
all. They're just selling their THC for the high.
Speaking of which,
they hate to see me coming up here in Michigan.
It's so funny, actually. I want to talk about your old state. Okay. So Florida.
Did you see what DeSantis is trying to do? He's got $10,000. I didn't
even see what DeSantis is trying to do. Like, forget about. I mean, DeSantis. That's the whole problem in itself. But but no. So I have a patient. So one of my seizure patients I was mentioning earlier, she lives in Florida. So I was working with her. Actually, I got recommended from a colleague of mine that went to the same program I did. She was contacted by the parents to say, hey, what do we do? And she was like, well, Leah, I don't really know seizures that well, so why don't you help her out? So I was like, sure. So I took her on and I started her on a tincture, and then it was working, but it wasn't lasting long enough. So I wanted a pill. So I was like, okay, let's see what pills they have at your dispensary. Ends up that the doses are just for like rec. I mean, the lowest dose of THC I could get was 0.5 per pill, and that's too much for her. So it's like, literally, they care about rec. They care about rec. They do not care about the patients who can't use THC. They only care about rec. And it was really sad. And I even said to my colleague, I go, this is awful. Like, you guys don't have any better products? And she goes, no, it's a mess. Like, it's still totally a rec market. Same thing happened in California. We have this amazing company out here called Cannabis Design. I do not work for them. I do not know anybody who works there. I just happen to love their products because I like how they titrate them. They have a 40-to-1 product, which is 20 milligrams of CBD to 0.5 THC. They have 20 milligrams of, and then they have 20 milligrams of THC to 1 milligram, of CBD to 1 milligram of THC. They have 20 milligrams to 2. They have 20 milligrams, they have it. So they have a 40-to-1, a 20-to-1, a 10-to-1, a 2-to-1, a 8-to-1, a 2-to-1, a 1-to-1. They have a 4-to-1. They have ratios. So, hey, you need more THC, go this way. Oh, you have too much THC, you need CBD, go that way. But these dispensaries in California, they don't know how to market them because all they care about is rec. So these amazing products are always on the discount shelf, and it's hard to find them now because the dispensaries put them on the discount shelf because they don't know how to market them, so they don't sell them. And then they stop selling and they stop buying them because they don't know how to sell them. And then these products that the patients actually would be beneficial for them, that would help them, they don't buy them anymore. So I'm telling you, this is completely a rec market. And for that reason and that reason only is why I'm really kind of a little bit more towards the reschedule, because we need to look out for our patients. And if we just descheduled it, it's literally going to turn into what it is now in California, where, and it happens in every
I
state.
agree.
When it goes from medical to rec, it's like, oh, we're rec now. Oh, you're rec now. You don't need to worry about medical. It's like, I have little old biddies that come to dispensaries that say, I have insomnia. What do I take? They get a 5 milligram THC gummy, and then they're paranoid for hours.
Yeah.
Horrible system, which is why if you want to make it a Schedule 3, just to make sure a healthcare professional is involved, great. If you deschedule it, there has to be a healthcare professional involved. I personally believe there should be a rec market and there should be a medicinal market. And the medicinal market has to have a healthcare professional on site, a cannabis trained healthcare professional on
I like
site.
this.
Because,
I like this idea, really.
Yeah. Because, and that's the only reason why I'm like, okay, rescheduling can at least help the medical patients. It can get our prescriptions, it can get our meds paid for by insurance, at least somewhat. It can at least help with dosing, finding the right products, and at least make sure that these patients don't just utilize cannabis medicine and hope for the best, that they have somebody they're working with that they can ask questions to. Because
Michigan had 400,000 medical cannabis patients when rec came in, and now there's less than 30,000, and I'm one of them.
Same thing happened in California. And the reason is because a lot of the people got their card to be able to get access to their medicine. So as soon as it went rec, they're like, well, why do I need to pay
why
the
do I
government?
need a card?
Exactly. Right. And in California, the rec gets you nothing. All you can do with a rec is get a higher volume. It doesn't get rid of taxes. It doesn't decrease the price. It doesn't get you through insurance. So why spend a couple $100s to get a card when that couple $100 is just gonna,
buy you more weed at the rec?
Exactly. So it's just, what's the point? So, and that's my issue. So I personally think that if they, at least if it goes rescheduled, if they can put it into some sort of form and some sort of process where it involves better care for patients, that's my focus. Because if you're a rec user and you want to use, I mean, like I've always said, I think that 90% of people who use cannabis, maybe even higher than that, use it, even if it's like, oh, I like to just chill out at the end of the day. That's still medicine. You had stress, you hadn't, whatever was causing that stress, and it calmed you down. That's a medicine. But those who, like I said, are just, I'm bored, I'm going to drink some alcohol, I'm bored, I'm going to smoke some weed. Yeah, that's more like cannabis use disorder, especially if you're using when it's causing issues in your life and you're unable to hold down a job and stuff because you'd rather be home smoking. That actually exists, and that is cannabis use disorder. So
you got more problems than cannabis use disorder. If you've got cannabis use disorder, yes, you got problems up here that are causing that cannabis use disorder. And actually,
cannabis use disorder is actually now in the guidelines for mental health. It is actually a mental health ailment now. It's legitimate. So people just don't be like, oh, they're just a stupid pothead. Now they can say they legitimately have a cannabis use disorder that they need, and they can get help for it. They can actually get meds to help them get off of the cannabis that they're using inappropriately, for those who are using it inappropriately. But like I said, majority don't use it inappropriately, and majority of people usually are patients who need it.
Generally, those are just kids, aren't they, that are using it inappropriately?
There's a lot of, especially as people are getting older, people lose their jobs. They use it at first to cope with the loss of the jobs. Then they just keep using it. And, oh, I'm too tired to go look at the newspaper. But I need to still smoke my weed because I'm so depressed. But this weed makes me tired, so I can't look for jobs and stuff.
I see.
Nah, okay, yeah. Now it's turned into a disorder, because if you can't function on it, it's a disorder.
Right.
So, or just at least function with the use that you're using it at, it's a disorder. So, so I mean, that does exist, but like I said, it's definitely not as common. But the biggest issue in cannabis, in my opinion, is patients. It's patients having groups to discuss amongst themselves what to do, because they don't have a number one place to go to. And that's why I always recommend our website, the www.pcccrx.org. because all of our info's on there, and we do monthly, quarterly, we do free educational nights, cannabis educational nights, where we go over different things.
Yeah,
So
man, I really wanted to come to that last one too. Um, what have you found? And let me just ask you to say that again. It's
yeah, it's
pcccrx.org.
www.pc like cat, C like cat, C like cat. So 3 C's, a P and then 3 C's, and then an RX.org. And
Okay, good.
it has, so that's the nonprofit website. And if you join to become a member, you get access to all the old recordings. So
Okay, fabulous. Oh,
yeah,
good.
so it's every recording, including all of our CEs, our past continuing education, where if you can watch, you can watch the thing whether or not you need the CE, but if you need the CE, you actually get free CE
You
for
can get it.
those who need it. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So it's great. And we just keep adding. We never take anything down. We just keep unless something's not relevant, but we just keep posting. So back in, I think June, it was either May or June, it was on rescheduling. So that's up there, it's posted, ready to go. And I actually just presented in June, at the end of June, on cannabis basics, just to understand cannabis therapy, kind of where the history was for cannabis therapy, what the endocannabinoid system is and how does it work, along with different ailments, as well as interactions for meds, as well as synthetics information. So as soon as I receive that from the organization I presented to, that's also going to get posted on there. So there's lots of info.
There
Lots
sure
of good info.
is.
And
hey,
then
tell us. Yeah, go ahead.
Our next one coming up is actually going to be in August, and Dr. Cody Peterson will be presenting. And he will be presenting on the cannabis care model. So that's a little bit more kind of what we're talking about, of what the care model should look like how patients should be treated and how we should be working with patients for cannabis. So that will be really exciting. So that's coming up in August. And
yeah, he's marvelous.
Oh, he's wonderful. And then in October, myself and another one of the PCCC colleagues, Paul Lawholm, him and I both have our background in long-term care pharmacy, which is long-term care homes, like elderly homes.
Oh, yes.
So mostly for elderly care. And we're going to be presenting on cannabis for senior care. So,
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of really great information. So definitely stay tuned. If you're a member, you get automatic reminders of the upcoming presentations and free access. So if you can't attend live, at least you can just grab them whenever you would like to grab them.
Fantastic, Leah. I'm so proud for you. And I know you've been working so hard to accomplish all of this. Can you tell us a little itty bit of science about maybe what else can help tame THC besides CBD?
Sure. So CBD, it's kind of a back and forth on how helpful CBD can be. A lot of times in larger doses, it can be helpful for THC, but also CBD, as Cody likes to say, is very promiscuous. It likes to bind to everything, and it can cause a lot of issues. So a lot of times people will actually flip over to CBG. The studies have actually shown that CBG doesn't cause as many of those up and downs and could be helpful. But also, so the new study, actually, I believe it was from Dr. Russo, presented a study that he did that just completed on the use of limonene. Yep. So, and the only thing that's interesting about limonene is not only does it help with the psychoactive effects of THC, but it can also make the cannabis more potent. So it kind of does both. So people just have to be careful with limonene. So the biggest thing is you want to have low THC percentage in your cannabis. So pretty much, like, let's say you have a high CBD, low THC, and limonene, that's going to help to balance out that THC. But as you go up with THC percent, limonene can only do so much. And then at a certain level of THC, limonene actually enhances the effect it gives you more of a little bit of a boost. So, because in other words, it can make cannabinoids. And by that, I don't mean the euphoria. I mean specifically the effect of the cannabinoids, because limonene has actually shown, D-limonene has actually shown to be synergistically affected by cannabinoids and vice versa, where other terpenes are not actually as affected. So, for example, limonene has a synergistic ability. So it's actually, you get the benefit from the limonene health-wise and the benefit from the cannabinoids health-wise. When mixed together, they're like, it's 1 + 1 is 3. So that's why if you have high THC percent plus the limonene, you might still have a problem with the euphoria. But if it's lower THC, the limonene will help to balance that. Also, with the limonene, like I said, the limonene will also help with the other cannabinoids being beneficial as well. So other things such as beta-pinene actually does the opposite. And if you've got beta-pinene terpene plus you've got cannabinoids, it makes the cannabinoids work less. So
Really?
it decreases the effect. Yeah, that's specifically beta-pinene. And then if you get other such as myrcene and stuff like that, they work additively. So 1 + 1 is 2. So what's interesting though is limonene. That's why actually when he came out with the research, I was like, really? I thought that would actually make the THC worse, but it ends up, it all depends on the amount of THC. But what they've shown is the THC with a low, the same THC with a low
percentage
of the limonene and a different terpene versus a higher percentage, the higher percentage does help. So it's important to know that it both has a synergistic ability. So you want to be careful with the percent, but it also does have a benefit to prevent the more, but it's the paranoia effects specifically. And what causes most of those paranoia effects in cannabis is actually the higher dosages of THC anyway. So that's why if you bring it down, and what they say is for paranoia, it's better to have a high CBD, low THC. The low THC will keep you calm and relaxed, and the CBD will also keep you calm and relaxed. But if you have high THC and low CBD, CBD is not going to have much to do. Even with limonene, I mean, if you have high THC, you know, limonene can only do so much to prevent the paranoia from the THC.
Right. Can you clarify for us what you regard as low THC in percentage?
So that, I mean, it's based off of the study that he did. So I don't have the article in front of me, so I don't want to give the incorrect
ballpark is
but
fine.
I was going to say just mostly CBD dominant versus THC dominant.
Well, but I'm talking about when we go in and we ask for low percentage THC, you know, because across the counter they'll tell you, oh yeah, we got 28% THC in this product. So we got 34%. But you're talking about something like around 10 to 15% of THC. Is that?
No, it's not the same thing, because you can have low THC and still have THC be dominant. I'm talking about CBD dominant. It's not the same thing. So if you can have a plant that has more THC than CBD, but still the THC is only 7%. Or you can have a plant that's 7% THC but has CBD at like, you know, at 30%.
Right.
So that's different. So when you have a lot more CBD than THC, the effect from the plant is going to be different than THC at 7% with CBD at, let's say, like point something percent.
Right.
So low is, I wouldn't say low as much as I would say CBD dominant, because CBD dominant means that over 0.5% of the cannabinoids is not THC. And that's really what you want to get. You want to get where over half the cannabinoids are not THC.
Wow. I guess I've never thought of it like that.
So yeah, there's the problem. So like I always try to, the funny thing is, and I'm queer, so I'm part of the whole pride fun thing. So I like to think of cannabis plants similar to sexuality. Actually, it's a range. So on one side you got CBD dominant and almost no and very, very, very low THC. On this side, you've got THC dominant and very, very, very low CBD. I mean, mind you, it's not as linear because you got CBG over here. You got other things in other places. But if you're talking about just CBD and THC, you could kind of think about it like that, where down this side, you got mostly CBD. Down that side, you got mostly THC. Now, if you're on, and so the most important thing are the types. So type 1 cannabis is THC dominant. It doesn't
right.
mean what the percent of THC is, it's just dominant. And type 3 is CBD dominant, and type 2 is a hybrid. So you would say type 2 would be dead set on that line between
Right.
between THC and CBD. And then a type 1 would be this way, a type 3 would be that way. And there's also type, like I said, 4 and 5, which are like CBG dominant and something, which again would be off of this line.
Right.
And but on this line, you could have a type 1 that was grown like with seeds from like the 1960s, and you're most likely gonna, if you somehow were able to preserve seeds from the 1960s and somehow were able to get them to grow, I mean, great green thumb on you if you can. But those seeds are going to be the same potency as they were back in the day, because that's where they came from.
Right.
So that's going to be THC dominant, because that's what most of the strains were back then, but it'll probably only be about 7%, because it's going to be low. It's going to only be like 10%. It's going to be very low, because cannabis back then was way lower in percentage.
Yeah.
But then you can have a CBD, where the CBD is very high, by very high, I mean like in the 20s, 30s. But the THC is not dominant, but it was grown really well with new seeds and all the current chemovars are much more potent than they used to be. So even though that's CBD dominant, it could, in a type 3, it could still have the same amount of THC as a type 1 plant.
Hey everybody, it's me, honey. I'm at the dog park, of course, about to play a little music. I'm gonna light up so I can get a little spiritual support going on here too. Not only for my music, but also pain relief for my arthritic hands and all that neuropathy going on. As an old woman, we get all that stuff going on. But that's okay, we've got remedies and help for it now. Good, gentle plant therapy. But what I'm really here to tell you about is that I'm going to be a guest speaker at the Women's Spirit Retreat coming up July 18th through 20th. It's a free online event, and I'm going to be talking about the spirit of cannabis and how to tame THC in marijuana so that you can take advantage of gentle plant therapy for pain relief without worrying about getting too high or, having anxious feelings from that special compound. Anyway, join me to learn how you can tame THC and marijuana and about the beautiful, gentle, spiritual effects that cannabis can give you when you're trying to be creative or you just want to be creative and gentle and loving. Pearl, thank you for telling everybody about our event coming up. We so appreciate all of your chatter. Thanks, Pearl. I love you. Everybody, come see us at the event.
So, would you tell me about beta-caryophyllene, or what you know about it? Because I've recently had an experience that's just blown me away. Beta-caryophyllene did for me what 6 years of using cannabis in all kinds of ways and varieties didn't. It didn't settle this hand neuropathy. And using a beta-caryophyllene product over the last couple of months has so settled that down for me. I'm now sleeping all night long. And it also stopped my bladder from spasming in the middle of the night. So I'm not getting up, several times a night anymore. And I was hoping cannabis would do that for me, but it didn't, or maybe just the type that I have been using or the way I've been using it just didn't get it for me. But a few drops of beta-caryophyllene and I'm like I'm a different woman.
So
have you noticed?
So I know which product you're referring to. What it comes down to is in the inhaled version, their terpene profiles are really low. So, I mean, the amount of beta-caryophyllene you're going to actually get from inhaled is very minimal.
Right.
On top of that, even in the tincture forms, you don't know. It depends. So some tinctures are isolates. So all there is the cannabinoids and no terpenes. So, and as we know, terpenes have medical benefits. So if you're
Right.
extracting out those terpenes, that's why I never recommend isolates to patients. I usually also, unless they're already on a full spectrum or a broad spectrum, if they can't tolerate the THC, then I'll recommend an isolate maybe to add if they need to up a specific cannabinoid, but that's about it. But what's happening, I've noticed, is a lot of companies, they either do isolates or they do extractions, but they forget that the terpene profile matters. So for example, they'll do a 20-to-1. So they'll do, which they can sell through the mail, which there'll be 20 milligrams of CBD, 1 milligram of THC, which is fine, or 10 to 0.5. But what happens is that they might have extracted that 20-to-1% from a CBD, a type 2, a CBD dominant strain that was heavy in Mercy and didn't have beta-caryophyllene in it.
Right.
Now, beta-caryophyllene is one of the more common, is one of the most prominent terpenes. However, again, if you're having a product, it's obviously, I know the product, it's not straight caryophyllene, beta-caryophyllene, but it's a high amount of beta-caryophyllene. It's more than you're going to get from. And so what this company did was say, well, let's use just the terpene for its medical benefits. So it sounds funny, but instead of having an isolate of cannabinoids, you have an isolate of terpene.
Right.
So being the fact that you still use cannabinoids, what's happening in your system is your body goes, okay, well, I'm already using these cannabinoids. Well, this terpene that this terpene isolate I'm taking is now mixing with the cannabinoids I'm already taking. And then, so pretty much you are making your own full spectrum in your body.
Yes. I'm healing my own endocannabinoid deficiency, whatever it may be.
Yeah, but with the combination of both, like for example, if you took no cannabinoids and you only were taking this product, there's a good chance that the effect would not be as strong as you taking your other cannabis with it.
Right. Yeah.
And the reason why it's effective is because the medicinal benefits of beta-caryophyllene, which you're getting, this product has a lot higher than you're going to get from a cannabis product.
That's right.
It's the higher isolated terpene along with the separate cannabinoids you take in a different form, and together you're getting the increased terpene plus the cannabinoids all working together in your body.
Cannabis alchemy. Don't you love it?
Yes. That's why I'm like, you really definitely still want that full spectrum. But again, you can get full spectrum by, and I wouldn't say full spectrum by mixing a bunch of isolates. I would say try to use a full spectrum product, whether it's flower or anything that's full spectrum or broad spectrum if you can't tolerate THC, and then add in isolates from terpene isolates or other things to help with the boosts that you're looking for.
Right, because there's more than just cannabinoids and terpenes. There's esters and alcohols and all kinds of stuff,
which are huge.
And the
because
polyphenols.
The polyphenols, are the antiviral, antibacterial, and antifungal part of the plant. So that's huge, and they're actually starting to look into the flavins as treatment for different types of cancers. So again, the research is not there yet. They're still in the lab phase. They're not even in the animal study phase, but just what they're showing is that the flavins from the cannabinoid plant, from the cannabis plant, can actually help block the development of some of these cancers, which is phenomenal. And I'm hoping that they are able to progress and go and see them in animal models and eventually human models as well.
Yeah, that would be so wonderful. I'm just happy that there's, already thousands of clinical studies now, finally, and they're accumulating, and it's wonderful to watch. It's so exciting.
Oh yeah,
so
and I
exciting.
always recommend to providers. So for all of the practitioners out there that are either anti-cannabis or want more studies or research, I 100% just recommend going to www.cannakeys.com. It's CANNAKEYS.com. It's a compendia of all cannabis research, whether positive or negative or undecided. So it's not biased at all. It's just a compendia where you can search by terpene, you can search by cannabinoid, you can search by ailment, you can search by any of that. And it's a great compendia. It's a great place there is different access if you pay for it versus not. But it's literally where anybody who wants to know anything about cannabis research should go and look at this, because again, you will see positive, you will see negative, you will see everything. And it will also give you a summary of, based on all the research out there, this is what we currently see. And it shows you type 2 is more beneficial for this ailment, type 1 is more beneficial, type 3 is more beneficial, CBG is more beneficial. And it really does break it down. Actually, it has phenomenal studies on terpenes. I've been really I've been doing a lot of work with terpenes lately. And they have great studies about what's coming out, and the different, I know that there's a couple that certain terpenes are starting to show promise for breast cancer, certain are starting to show for prostate cancer. So it's really great compendia. And again,
Wow.
some studies are, and people say, oh, it's so new, there's no good studies. It's like, there are absolutely human studies there are absolutely animal studies, there are absolutely double-blinded studies too. So not just human studies, but double-blinded studies. So really, cannakeys.com is what I again, I have no affiliation to them except for that I buy the product because I want the research. But it is definitely the site I recommend. Like, you have questions, you don't believe it, you want to research more, Canna Keys.
I so appreciate this new resource. Yeah. So is it CANNAKEYS.com?
Yep, you got it.
Okay. I will be on there. I don't know why I didn't know about this, but yeah, I appreciate
for some reason, they don't promote themselves very well. The only way I knew about it was from another cannabis practitioner that told me about it. And then since then I haven't heard nobody mention it. So I always mention it because I'm like, well, I like PubMed that has all the normal research, but why go to a thing that has research on everything when I can go to a compendia that has research on the one topic I want to know about? And it separates it based on every single thing. Like, so if I have a patient that has, if I have a patient that has seizures, I can go in and look at the most up-to-date research that we have on seizures, and to see, have new things been found out, have new cannabinoids been identified to be beneficial, what's going on, I can just look at it.
Hey, speaking of that, do you get together with any of the other major seizure therapists like Bonnie Goldstein and all of them about kids with autism and seizures and stuff?
So it's actually funny you mentioned that, Bonnie. So back before I got my master's from the master's program, I did a certification course, and Bonnie was actually one of the instructors. This was back in 2020.
Really?
So I actually got her to teach to me about, not me, like everybody, like me and everybody who was there, about virtually, of course, because it was pandemic. But I got to learn from her virtually about pediatrics and cannabis, which was phenomenal.
Oh, I bet.
And then I went to CanMed last year, and I did the practicum, which she was presenting as well. And her and I have actually collaborated. I wouldn't call it collaborating necessarily. I'd like to say I collaborated with Bonnie, trust me. But we were recently on a call together. I was one of 12. She was one of 12. And it was about the issue we're having in California, because Bonnie has a company who creates her products for her patients that are CBD dominant usually, and obviously, and CBG and whatever else she needs for the patients, as well as the acid forms. And in the state of California, they're trying to change what's been approved through the farm bill, and they're trying to cut down on the amount of THC. So I think they were trying to kind of cut it out from all products that can be shipped in the mail. And so California is like, no. So I was on the call as somebody who works with CBD dominant products for my patients. Bonnie was on the call. The nurses from Holistic Caring were on the call. Megan from Trusted Nurses.
I'm very worried about her and her product line.
Oh no, she'll and that's why we were on the call. So we were actually on the call with a gentleman from Normal who was writing up the legislation on this thing to fight it. And pretty much the hard thing was he was very nice. You could tell he was very wreck. He kept using the word pot, and it's like, And I mean, like, I'm like, dude, you have Dr. Bonnie Goldstein on this call. Don't call it pot. Like, come on, dude.
Right.
But either way, I was like, I think me and all the nurses and Bonnie all kind of rolled her eyes when he said pot. We're like, it's like, obviously you don't understand our plight if you're going to call it pot. So we were really going about the tinctures and how, like, we can't do I think they wanted to do 1.5 milligrams per product. Like the entire product has 1.5 milligrams of THC. I'm like, that's like a dose. That's one dose. That's not one product. That's one dose. There should be that times the entire doses in the bottle, And so we were all like, so I think that we kind of got to the thing of 1.5 like we're hoping for them to at least approve 1.5 at minimum per dose. So that's what we're hoping for. So I think, though, that it based on all the people who were there, it sounds, Bonnie followed up the next day, and it sounds like things are going our way. So they're not going to cause these issues. But the issue with the thing that always bothers me, and I understand that I'm not going to fix this. I understand that this is just how it's always been. But I hate that politics comes first and healthcare comes second, because why should people who don't understand healthcare make legislation for healthcare?
There it
they
is.
should be
There it
reaching
is.
out to people who understand healthcare and say, hey, we want to protect patients. What doses? We know you are, like Dr. Bonnie Goldstein. You are an expert. You are one of the gurus. You are one of the first people to really bring home cannabis therapy for patients, pediatric patients in the United States. What do you use for your patients so that we can make proper legislation? So she could say, I'm not going to use 5 milligrams per dose every time, or if I do, they can get that from a dispensary. But we need at least, 1.5 per dose, and not for one bottle, because that dose is too low. So it's just frustrating that but again, I understand that I'm not going to fix anything. All I can do is complain about it. But yeah, so at the end of the day, it looks like it's going to go that way, and the practitioners will be able to keep their products.
Apologies for my little pack of wolves carrying on like wolves. They must have heard something outside. I'm real relieved to hear you say that it looks like it might be going your way, because it's just so terrifying when the legislators get their crazy ideas in their little heads and decide that they have to do something, and they don't know what they're doing.
They always think they're helping, but I give them a lot of credit for trying to help, but they should reach out to the people who work in it to find out how to help.
Yeah,
exactly. Which instead of going back and forth of making a bad decision, then having everybody argue about it, and then go back and just reach out and say, hey, you guys work with this. I see your products. What is a typical dose? And most practitioners will say a 30-to-1 or 20-to-1 is a typical dose. Again, ratios, obviously cannabinoid doses change with ratios. Yeah. But that's what we've discussed. So we think that they're listening, which is great. But I mean, Megan's done huge strides to help people, especially in sports. Dr. Goldstein has done huge strides for pediatrics throughout the whole entire country, but especially in California. So it's just, the biggest issue we had was, if they were to set this in motion, our patients would lose access to the medication they need. And that's the number one thing we can't do, because if a patient is stable and has been seizure free for years because they can get a medication through Dr. Goldstein, but now all of a sudden they can't, well, now you're running the risk of sending that poor child back into seizures for no good reason.
Oh my goodness. There's so much to consider and so much work to do behind this movement. I guess one of the last things I'd like for you to do for me is to change my mind about using this.
What is it?
I want you to tell people why we shouldn't be using these little vape pens.
Well, so it actually depends on the vape pen. And it depends on the vape pen. And the reason it depends is because vape pens themselves can actually leak. And this comes right from, it's like, I'm going to go on Facebook, because I'm not Facebook, I'm going on LinkedIn to remember his name, but he posts everywhere about heavy metals, and I'm trying to remember. He's phenomenal. He's just brilliant about heavy metals. Of course, I'm
So
gonna
I
forget him.
am shocked
Oh,
while you're
Robert
looking
Tom.
for
I think
that.
his name is. I think it's Robert Thomas. I could be wrong though. But
Okay.
whoever the gentleman is, he's presented multiple times at the master's program about heavy metals, especially because cannabis as a plant is actually really great at extracting heavy
Sucking
metals.
up heavy metals. Right.
So even if you get the product tested and prove, oh, yep, the product's clean, the extract is clean, there's no heavy metals. If the company is getting a vape cartridge, empty one, from places that don't monitor them, that could be leaking heavy metals into the oil that's already there. So the only way to be safe is to make sure that you contact the company who manufactures the vape pen and to verify that they have gotten their actual empty cartridge tested for heavy metals. If they have not gotten their cartridge tested for heavy metals, there's no way to be sure that you're safe. So the best way to be safe when it comes to inhalation is to use flower in a vape device, because that way you get the vaping, but you don't get the potential for that to break down, because those devices are usually much bigger and those are usually checked. It's the little vape easy cartridge. It's usually not like even the pre-made ones. It's the ones that like just the thing that pops out of the pen that you can put it right back into a pen.
Right. Those long
like
cartridges are right. So
and just because they make those in bulk, they get them from countries that don't monitor. I'm not going to say which country I'm talking about, but everybody knows which country I'm talking about. And they just have heavy metals just that easily leach stuff. So that's the most important thing is now, one thing you can do, this is getting really fancy, is get a very nice high-end empty cartridge that you can get from a reputable company that does test their cartridges. And then you'd have to extract, and then you'd have to just buy, usually the best would be just to buy the liquid by itself and then put it in that cartridge, and then you have a safe cartridge. That's a lot of energy.
That's a lot.
And you gotta suck the stuff out or find it. Not gonna
happen.
It's a mess. It's dirty, it's messy. But that way you can be safe. The other thing is you can also just make sure that you're calling the manufacturer and say, have you had your empty vape cartridges tested for heavy metals? If they say yes, they should be able to provide you a certificate of analysis for it.
Ooh, there it is. That proof that there's no contamination in the product.
And when they say, "Oh, we have a certificate of analysis for the vape pen," say, "No. I know that the extract is clean, and I know your company made a good product. I'm worried about where those empty cartridges came from." And a lot of times, most companies don't check that because they're not worried. It's a device. Why should they have to test it for anything? But it could absolutely leach heavy metals if you're not careful.
It absolutely could. Here's the other problem that I found. Sorry about my wolves. Oh man, I used to be a smoker when I was a kid, and that hand to mouth thing. Wow, it's powerful. And I have not been using these at all. And I found it in my purse today, and I've still got it in my hand. Yeah. I'm damned. I don't want to let it down. It's like my security blanket. And I sucked on this just harder than anything without even realizing it was already in my mouth and I was drawing on it again. And so
that's the problem people have, is that with a vape pen, because it's not just lit where you're like, oh, I'm going to burn somebody because it's lit. You just forget it's there. And then you just
keep doing it,
using it when you don't even need it.
And that's overuse.
And that's overuse. Exactly.
That's
because
overuse.
You don't need to use it, and you're just
conscious
you're not even conscious of the use. So yeah, so I wouldn't call that use disorder, but I would say a good reason if you're noticing now, mind you, I know a lot of people who are like in areas where they can't smoke, so the vape or have anything with a smell, so that the vape pen
very convenient.
Yeah, and so then that's convenient. But I always recommend, inhale for 3 seconds, and then put it actively away, like in a
Yeah.
purse or
Put it
out.
away.
Yeah, do not put it in a pocket because you will very quickly just reach it and it becomes a security blanket where you don't even want the inhale. It just happens that it's in your hand and it's just becoming a second nature as opposed to actually needing another dose.
Yes. Well, thank you for reminding us of the heavy metal issues from, other places that don't have systematic OSHAs in place to protect us.
Exactly.
And yeah, right. And for helping me see that this is just a hand to mouth habit
It's a
that
pacifier.
yeah, it's a pacifier.
Yep.
And I'm under a little bit of, stress and stuff. And so, boy, I've had this in my hand all day today. And I am just going to put it down and put it back in my purse where I left it, where it's been for a year. I was surprised it even worked. And leave it for some time when I need the, discretion of a vape pen
Exactly.
in
And
a
that's what
hurry.
that's
Yeah.
what I tell patients, just especially like
Right.
women like that, put it in your purse, put it like obviously in states that you're not going to just get in trouble if you had a vape pen on you.
Right.
Yeah,
If you're
on
going to
state.
Russia. Right.
Yeah. Or like if you're going to Texas, don't have your vape pen on you.
Yeah.
Stuff like
Russia's
that.
other home.
Yeah. Don't bring your vape pen to Texas. But in
Sorry.
general, like, but that's the biggest thing is like vape pens really should be going in your purse or your outdoor when you leave the house and you don't plan on it's where, hey, I'm leaving the house. I might need a dose out. I can't it doesn't either. I don't like that people know I'd like to be quiet about my medicine and I don't want people to question. I mean, and especially in the state of California, so many people have vape pens because half of them are tobacco because they are like,
Oh.
honestly, if I see somebody smoke cigarettes in the state, I freak out because I go, I haven't seen anybody smoke a cigarette in like years.
Right.
So it's weird to me, but everybody is smoking tobacco through the pens.
Oh.
So that's why it's so okay. It's so accepted because it just smells fruity when they blow out and nobody knows what you're smoking. So nobody questions it. But of course, taking out a rolled, cannabis flower, or taking out a pipe is going to look a lot different than inhaling a couple puffs on
Right.
something that looks just like what everybody else in society is using.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Wow. I wonder if uh kids are falling into tobacco as fast as they did with cigarettes with these new vape contraptions.
So no, only because they stopped. Well, that's actually why in a lot of states, like, so I don't remember I know California is one of them, and I know there's a couple more. They're banning Juul.
Yeah.
I don't smoke, so I don't know much about the product, but
it was a
flavored
sexy
tobacco.
little, yeah, it was a sexy little piece of jewelry that you could take a nice hit from of tobacco.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And flavored tobacco.
Flavored. And that was the problem is
Right.
that a lot of kids were getting into it because the flavors.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
then getting addicted to tobacco.
exactly.
Right.
So that's why they've in the state of California, you can't even get those. So nobody even under, like, nobody can, no matter what age. So they don't even have them as available. So to be honest, what I'm not sure about undergrad, but I will say that in colleges they did do a study and they did show that, again, this is not tobacco, but they did show that alcohol use is down and cannabis use is up. So because students are finding more so that they can go out on the weekends, use cannabis, and on Monday they can be functional. Monday morning for their 8 a.m. test or 8 a.m. class, they can be functional. Where if they're out, Sunday partying and then Monday morning they're like, oh,
alcohol poisoning. Yeah, right.
Or just a hangover, not even the poisoning, just the basic hangover. So what they're starting to realize is it's not causing issues. They're not feeling as bad. So actually, and since it's becoming more, I think really the reason it was so low, that the usage was lower for cannabis and higher for alcohol, was because of the stigma. But now that we're hitting a point where most states are like, we don't care as long as you're over 18, go for it. They're like, well, if we get to choose, then I'm going to choose cannabis. I'm not going to choose alcohol. And I have to be honest, I actually put up a post recently because throughout the country, and I think in your state too, they make these amazing cannabis beverages. However, they don't sell them at bars, which seems kind of unfair. So it's like, so if I go to a bar, I'm obligated to drink alcohol or drink nothing, or drink a Pepsi or soda or something. It's like, but what if I want something that's going to make me feel relaxed, but that's not alcohol? And there's no option. And I know that, I think Michigan, they said, I know Minnesota, definitely. I know definitely Minnesota. I definitely know Missouri, and I know Maine. Those three specifically, I know that they are selling cannabis beverages that are alcohol free at bars, and they're going over so well. Like, and they're low. I mean, it doesn't have to be
Also,
high.
at places like Total Wine are beginning to sell cannabis drinks.
As long as except the THC just has to be like less than the 0.3%, which is fine, because if you get a can, for example, it has 2 milligrams of THC, 4 milligrams of CBD in about, 6 ounces. So if you do the math, that's 3%, that's less than 0%, that's less than 0.3% THC. But 2 milligrams of THC is still enough to give you a little bit, especially during the day when you're not on anything. It's enough to give you a little bit of I feel that. I feel calmer now. Like, not enough to be like, whoa, but like, I feel calm now. That those 2 milligrams, that
right,
helps. And that's about the same as a beer for people. So a lot of
it
these
can
states
boost your confidence. It can calm all of that negative chatter going on in your head. Just, it's not very much, but it's enough to calm stuff down.
Which is exactly what people are looking for from alcohol, except without the side effects of the inflammation from the alcohol. Right. So like at my home, I don't drink. I'm not an alcohol drinker really. So I even posted, like I said, on LinkedIn about the, we need like, no, please. I'm okay. I don't need alcohol. I only drink cannabis beverages, because like, I always say this, every single New Year's, all my friends who come over, they all drink alcohol. I'm the only one that only drinks cannabis beverages. I don't drink any alcohol. I drink cannabis beverages. I wake up the next morning feeling phenomenal. I feel great, because I probably had more cannabis than I used to, because I drink a lot of beverages because it's New Year's. And I wake up, I feel great. I physically feel great. I mentally feel great. I just excuse me. I just feel like that the new year will be amazing. And every single one of my friends looks like they're about to, like, literally, it's like, don't talk to me. I'm in pain. I'm hurting. They're vomiting. They're having like stomach issues. And I'm up like, yeah, let's go. Let's go for a walk. Let's go do something. And this is just so clear that alcohol causes long-term problems. Cannabis, the next day you feel better. If anything, you don't feel worse. Definitely, you either feel the same or better.
Yeah.
So, for those, who like to use a tiny bit of cannabis, especially THC, for that type of feeling. And it's just, if they were to promote this at a California bar, I know many people would buy it over an alcoholic beverage. The only problem is that everybody's really afraid of regulation. So I don't really blame them, because the last thing they want to do is lose their liquor license, which is so hard to get, just because they allow for a different substance to be sold. So it's very frustrating, but I really like that cannabis beverages are becoming more prevalent and becoming more accepted. And inhalation, as a child, we were always told that any inhalation is bad, because really putting anything into our lungs is just not good. I mean, our lungs were made for air
and all that, right?
It's literally just made for air, like oxygen. That's all our lungs are made for. It's not made for anything else. Like, even bonfire smoke is not good for your lungs. And we all love, a lot of people love bonfires, but so inhalation of anything is not good for your lungs. It's not helping them. So to drink cannabis, it's more acceptable. You can drink a beer, you're drinking something that's kind of like a beer. So great. And I just like that it takes away a lot of the stigma, because smoking is bad. Where drinking hasn't been said as bad, so because we drink water, we drink other beverages. And so I've noticed that it's a lot more accepted at that level. So, I mean, like I'll travel with roadies, for example. So if I go out to a family dinner and people are having wine, I will use a low dose cannabis, like the 2 milligrams THC, and I'll squeeze it into my, into like usually bubbly water, seltzer, and just drink it. I mean, they have such amazing flavors. They have this lemon, they have this ginger lemongrass, which is so good for your stomach. It tastes
Who are you
like
talking about? That sounds so familiar. What?
it's canned, but the good can comes from California. The not as good canned products come from not California. So yeah, if you purchase can online, you're gonna get the hemp version that comes out of that does not come from out of California.
I see.
If you get it from a dispensary, you get the original canned products, which is why I keep those as roadies, and I bring the California ones with me because I find that the flavor and the effect is better. I find that the ones that are hemp based for some reason seem to feel like they're almost like half the effect, oddly enough.
Oh, interesting.
But the lemon ginger grass though, or the ginger lemongrass is the best. And it's like my patients who have used it for stomach issues are like, this is like a game changer. They're like, I can just bring this little packet with me to dinner. If I start, especially if I start having some indigestion from dinner, I just put it in a seltzer and I drink it. And people think I'm having a glass of wine when I'm actually taking my cannabis to help my stomach. So the ginger lemongrass actually helps the stomach, and then the cannabis helps as well.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful. A wonderful way of using the plant. And I guess I wasn't thinking that people were trying to use it medicinally at dinner time for their, gut issues.
Oh yeah, it's
But
amazing
yeah,
for gut issues, especially in the beverage. It gets absorbed so much faster than it would
sure.
if it was swallowed in a pill.
Yeah, sure. Oh, that's really interesting. I I'll I think I'm gonna look for some beverages up here in Michigan and see if they have any effect on me. Quite frankly, I'm ediblocked when I use, when I try to ingest edibles.
It
I just
could
don't
be
get any
liver
effect.
it could be liver function. I've noticed that for a lot of people, especially it's usually gummies that usually don't seem to affect those people. And they say, nope, I like my husband could probably eat an entire jar of gummies and have no effect from it. And it's
And
because
piece of cake with 100 milligrams of THC, and it didn't affect me at all.
but
Nothing.
also, how was the THC put into that cake? Because if it's an isolate, it's not going to affect you the same way as if it was full spectrum. So that's the other thing too, is because like I will make edibles for myself like
Uh-huh.
to use for medicine. And
Uh-huh.
I actually take the plant and I crock pot it, and I
Yeah.
actually, so it extracts the whole thing, and then
Right.
I put that into the cake. And I
Yeah.
mix that's the butter, I put that in the cake. Whereas some people just take liquid and they'll just put in it, and that won't do it usually.
I bet it was just an isolate.
It usually, if you buy it from a dispensary or from somebody who made it, it's almost always an isolate.
Yeah.
The very few times you get the good stuff is when you actually have somebody that says, oh, I make the butter at home. They make the butter at home. But nope, very few people I've ever known have made butter with isolates. They always use the plant. So, and what I've seen is I've actually had the same thing. And that's why I always say I never recommend isolates, because it explains why my patient who was 9 only needed 20 milligrams of CBD with 0.5 THC to get rid of his seizures. Where if he was on Epidiolex, which is an isolate, which is not a full spectrum like the product he had, you would need in the hundreds. So 20 milligrams versus hundreds of milligrams. I mean, that just shows you that the whole spectrum makes a big difference.
And Epidiolex is CBD, right?
It's an isolate of CBD. It's an extracted isolate. So they extract just the CBD out of the plant. But the problem is that's why our body doesn't do well with isolates. That's why if you eat an edible, if you eat 2 edibles, try this at home. Make butter. It's really easy. You literally take crock pot, take 4 sticks of butter, take an ounce of cannabis, take water, and let it crock pot for like 23 hours. Just leave it on low, let it do its thing, and then just squeeze out all the flour and then take the rest, put it in the fridge. You let it solidify, get rid of the nasty stuff at the bottom, reheat it up, re-solidify, and there you go. You got your butter. But take that butter and then make cookies out of it, or a recipe out of it, or cake, and then make the exact same recipe with an isolate. You'll see that the isolate does nothing. You'll be like, I just ate this whole cake and felt nothing. What happened? Where all of a sudden you'll take a couple pieces of the full spectrum and you'll be like, okay, yeah, that worked great. So what happens is, a lot of times in the isolated form, it's alcohol extracted, or they do nano-emulsion extraction, and it just doesn't get absorbed properly. And that's why it doesn't work. So a lot of times the issue with edibles is not the person, it's the edible. And that's why I always recommend try your own, or try from somebody who makes it from the raw plant, and see how it affects you, because you might have a completely different reaction.
Well, I'd like to.
Because I mean, for example, I've gotten from a dispensary, I got a product that said it was 100 milligrams of THC for the whole candy bar.
Yeah, right.
And then I've gotten the same product from a company that I know uses butter, that actually use the full extract. It's not an isolate. The isolated one, I kept eating pieces and kept waiting, I give it an hour, nothing. I went through the whole bar, nothing. And then I ate maybe 2 pieces the next day. I ate 2 pieces of the one that's full spectrum. And I was like, I have plenty. I am good.
Wow. So it really makes a huge difference to have all the cannabinoids and all of the compounds. It really does.
And it's even more than that. We need to have everything. And on top of that, you need somebody who knows how to formulate. That's the other problem. Because some people don't realize that if you put this and this together, that looks good. But nobody understands that MCT oil is not very bioavailable, meaning it doesn't get absorbed well. But everybody puts all the tinctures out there right now are
all
MCT oil. Because
why is
dirt,
that?
Because it's dirt cheap.
Cheap.
And what you really need is I think it's called rapeseed oil, RAPSEED oil. I think that's what it's called, or rapeseed oil or something like that.
Grapeseed oil?
No, RAPE.
Rapeseed.
Yeah, it's like rap or rapeseed. I forgot how you pronounce it, but it is a much healthier oil for the body. It's similar to grapeseed. It's a much healthier oil for the body, and it gets absorbed much easier. So why put products in an MCT oil that your body is going to somewhat absorb versus putting it in an oil that your body will easily absorb? That's another thing too. You put it in olive oil, it's more bioavailable than MCT oil, but no one uses olive oil because of the taste. So, and so all it comes down to, avocado oil is another one that's much more bioavailable than MCT oil, but again, then it kind of tastes a little bit like avocado. So it's just finding the right oil and what to use. But the problem is, the better oils, the more available oils for the body, are also the more expensive ones. So manufacturers are like, well, coconut oil is dirt cheap, so I'm just going to use coconut oil.
And they do. Yep. There it is. I love learning from you, honey. It's so interesting to find out all these juicy little behind the scene things and understand the factoids behind why stuff is affecting us the way it does. You certainly have a grasp on the inner workings of compounds on our body, and I'm so appreciative that we're friends and you can share that stuff with us. Thank you.
Yeah, let me know if any questions come in. I'm always happy to answer questions.
I surely will. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell the audience about anything coming up for you? We covered the PCCCRX.com and
.org. So
it's .org.
Yeah, www.pcccrx.org. Yeah.
ORG. Okay, I'm so glad you said that .org, and we'll have that in the show notes too. And anything else that you want to put in there, we can contact you through the Alchemist.
Email.
Let me see, where is it? have it right here on all my notes. See all that?
So yeah, it's so my email, they can contact me via my email, which is drleah, so Dr. Leah, so drleah, and then at alchemistcannabisconsulting.com.
And we'll have that link in the show notes for you as well. Leah, you're so precious to the whole world because of what you know and what you do, honey. And thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I love helping you guys out and
Me
explaining
too. Thank you. Okay, we'll see you again real soon. Take care. Mwah.
stuff. Mwah.